There is no greater strength a man can develop than the ability to master his emotions, because while most men are busy reacting, explaining, and defending, the man who remains calm, the man who thinks clearly while others panic, becomes dangerous in the best way. You see, the world does not belong to the loudest man. It belongs to the most composed, the man who knows how to feel without being ruled by what he feels, the man who experiences emotion but does not become it. Because make no mistake, emotions are powerful, but if left unchecked, they become liabilities. Anger, when unmanaged, turns into destruction. Fear, when fed, turns into paralysis. Envy, when ignored, becomes bitterness. These things do not just affect how you feel, they affect how you live. They alter your posture, your thinking, your decision. That is why mastering your emotions is not about suppressing them, it's about leading them. It's about stepping back and saying, I feel this, but I will not be ruled by this. That one habit separates men who succeed from men who sabotage themselves. Look around. Most men are not failing because of lack of opportunity. They are failing because of how they respond under pressure. One insult and they explode. One rejection and they collapse. One delay and they quit. And the world, it doesn't pause to accommodate their reactions. It moves on. But the man who has trained himself to remain steady, he's the one who rises. He's the one who sees clearly while others are blinded by emotion. He speaks when needed. He listens when it matters. He acts when the moment is right. And that timing, that clarity, that stillness is not natural. It's earned. It's built in silence, through discipline, through reflection, through choosing calm over chaos, reason over reaction, patience over pride. Because mastering your emotions is not a one-time decision. It is a daily discipline. It is the quiet decision to stay grounded when things don't go your way, to respond with principle rather than impulse, to be still when every part of you wants to strike. And here's the secret. The man who leads his emotions does not become cold. He becomes focused. He begins to channel his energy. Anger becomes fuel. Frustration becomes data. Fear becomes information. Every emotion once mastered becomes a tool, a signal, not a sentence. And that's where power begins. Because the moment you stop being ruled by how you feel, you start being led by who you are. And when that identity is grounded, when your mind is stable, life no longer pulls you off course. It begins to respond. So if you want peace, start here. If you want clarity, start here. If you want lasting power, the kind that others notice without you ever raising your voice, start here. Learn to master your emotions. Because the man who can master his inner world eventually shapes the outer one. When you begin the journey of mastering your emotions, you are not choosing comfort, you are choosing control. And control is the rarest form of power in a world full of reaction. You see, most people believe that to feel something deeply means they must act on it immediately. But emotional depth is not the problem. Emotional immaturity is. And immaturity reveals itself in how quickly a man abandons wisdom when emotion shows up. It shows up when frustration overrides focus, when jealousy poisons gratitude, when anger silences reason. And what follows is always the same: regret. That's why mastery does not mean ignoring how you feel. It means slowing down long enough to understand it. It means recognizing that emotions are messengers, not masters. They are alerts, not commands. A strong man pauses. He listens. He asks, where is this coming from? What truth is this emotion trying to show me? And how should I act, if at all? This is the beginning of emotional intelligence, not intellect in theory, but applied wisdom in motion. And once you begin to apply it, you gain something rare: emotional distance, a space between the stimulus and your response, a space where thought can breathe, where clarity can form, where dignity can take root. Because you've likely seen what happens when that space is missing. Men explode, they overreact, they destroy trust in seconds and spend years trying to rebuild it. They lose control of their tongue, their time, and their tone, and wonder why life always feels chaotic. But here's the truth. Chaos isn't always outside of you. Often it's within. And the man who masters his emotions begins to dismantle that internal chaos brick by brick. He no longer wakes up into reaction. He no longer moves from mood to mood. He no longer needs others to behave perfectly for him to stay composed. Instead, he leads. Not just others, he leads himself. And here's the benefit. Composure under pressure builds trust. It builds reputation. It builds gravity. People follow the man who stays grounded. They listen to the man who can remain calm, not because he's soft, but because he's trained. He has range, he has presence, he has discipline. Discipline to hold his tongue when provoked. Discipline to sit with discomfort without fleeing. Discipline to endure stress without collapsing into it. And all of this begins with focus, a kind of inward awareness that says, what I feel is real, but it's not always right. That's the mindset of the master. He feels what others feel, but he does not act like others act, and that separation gives him freedom. So I ask you, what has been leading you? Emotion or clarity? Impulse or principle? Because the man who feels everything but still moves with precision, that's the man who becomes unshakable. Not because he feels less, but because he's learned to lead through what he feels, and in doing so, he rises. There is no outward victory without inward control. The man who masters his emotions masters his trajectory. Because emotions left unchecked will always rewrite your plans. One moment of anger can unravel years of discipline. One wave of doubt can stop a lifetime of progress. One episode of pride can close doors that were meant to be open. This is why emotional mastery is not optional. It is essential. And yet, it is rarely taught. Most are told to suppress their emotions, to bury them, to hide them, to ignore them. But that isn't mastery. That's denial. And denial does not build strength. It builds pressure. Pressure that eventually explodes. Mastery is different. Mastery is understanding. It is the ability to observe your emotions without becoming them, to feel deeply and still act wisely, to experience the full spectrum of being human without handing your steering wheel over to any one feeling. It's not that the master feels less. In fact, he often feels more present, more aware, more connected. But he has learned to put his emotions in their proper place, under discipline. Because he knows the man who is emotional without direction is easily manipulated, easily offended, easily thrown off course. But the man who governs himself, who feels, thinks, and then chooses, that man is not only dangerous, he is rare. And the rare are always in demand. You see, emotional composure is more than a personal advantage. It's a competitive edge. In a room full of noise, the calm voice is the one that's heard. In a room full of urgency, the steady presence is the one that leads. The man who remains calm under fire earns trust, commands respect, and holds influence. But this composure is not created in the crisis. It is forged in the daily choices, the way you speak to yourself, the habits you allow, the tone you carry in ordinary moments. You don't become composed in chaos unless you've practiced it in peace. So, begin now. When you are tempted to snap, pause. When you are tempted to justify, reflect. When you are tempted to retreat, breathe. That moment between the feeling and the action is your point of power. Most miss it. You won't. Because you are no longer living on impulse. You are building on intention. And as you build, something profound happens. Your identity begins to shift. You are no longer the reactive one. You are no longer the easily triggered one. You are now the man who thinks clearly, speaks wisely, and moves with quiet conviction. And that shift, that identity, it will change your future. Because the man who learns to master his emotions is the man who becomes trusted with more leadership, more opportunity, more impact. Not because he demanded it, but because he earned it by mastering himself. There is a stillness that only the disciplined man knows, the kind of stillness that cannot be faked and cannot be disturbed. It is the stillness of a man who has mastered the inner war. While others battle emotion with emotion, he brings order to chaos, not through force, but through understanding. You see, most men are taught to dominate the world before they can even manage themselves. They pursue titles, wealth, power, yet collapse when confronted with rejection, stress, or criticism. They may look strong, but beneath the surface they are volatile, not because they are weak in ability, but because they are fragile in emotion. That fragility costs more than they know. Because emotion, untrained, leaks. It leaks into relationships, decisions, habits. It clouds judgment, it ruins trust, it erodes peace. And in time, it creates a life that feels heavy, not because of what's happening, but because of how the man inside is responding to what's happening. But emotional mastery breaks this pattern. It brings back clarity, it restores power, it sharpens thought. Because once you learn that your emotions are signals, not commands, you begin to lead with awareness instead of being dragged by impulse. So, what does this look like in practice? It looks like restraint when provoked. It looks like presence in discomfort. It looks like curiosity instead of rage. It looks like power, not in voice, but in control. And this power is not loud, it doesn't demand attention, it simply commands respect. Because people trust the man who doesn't flinch, the man who can feel without falling, the man who can stand still while others rush to judgment, to blame, to break down. And where does this strength come from? It comes from daily decisions, the decision to pause before responding, the decision to reflect before reacting, the decision to train your inner world, not occasionally but constantly. You read, you journal, you review. You challenge your thoughts. You ask yourself, is this feeling useful? Is this reaction wise? Is this aligned with who I'm becoming? That line of questioning builds separation, the healthy kind, a gap between who you are and what you feel, and in that gap is your freedom. Because here's what most don't understand. Feeling everything is not the same as following everything. You can feel disappointment and still choose discipline. You can feel anger and still speak with honor. You can feel fear and still take action. That is the definition of strength. And when this strength becomes natural, when your baseline becomes calm instead of chaos, your life changes. You no longer burn bridges over momentary emotions. You no longer destroy opportunities because of emotional sabotage. You no longer doubt your path because of a passing feeling. You become stable. And in a world of volatility, stability is wealth. So, continue. Train your awareness. Sharpen your restraint. Refine your thinking. Because the man who learns to sit still in the fire eventually becomes the man who commands the room when the smoke clears. The more a man learns to lead his emotions, the less he needs to control the world. Because mastery within creates freedom without. He is no longer at the mercy of circumstances. His peace is no longer dictated by outcomes. His energy is no longer drained by every change in the wind. He has become anchored, and that anchor is what makes him rise above the average. You see, the average man lives from the outside in. His mood is decided by his inbox. His confidence is shaped by compliments. His motivation rises and falls based on whether things are going his way. And so his life becomes chaotic. He wakes up with no center, tossed around by every new headline, every delay, But the uncommon man, the mastered man, lives from the inside out. He has built an inner code, a set of principles, habits, and reflections that do not bend when pressure shows up. His feelings still visit him, but they no longer own him. This is a different kind of strength, not loud, not aggressive, but firm. You can see it in his posture, you can hear it in his tone, you can feel it in his presence. He doesn't need to speak much, because the way he carries himself tells you everything. And the reason? He knows himself. He's studied his reactions. He's sat in discomfort. He's asked the hard questions. He's separated fact from fiction. And through all of it, he has trained himself to choose his response, not just his reaction. This is the edge. In relationships, it brings trust. People feel safe around a man who is steady. They open up to a man who listens, not one who explodes. They follow the man who leads with patience, not pressure. In business, it brings leverage. The man who doesn't panic in the face of risk, who can make decisions without being swayed by emotion, that's the man who wins long term. And in solitude, it brings peace, the kind of peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, but flows from within. But let me be clear, this kind of mastery is not a gift. It is a practice. It is forged through repetition, through learning, failing, reflecting, and refining. Through saying, I will not be ruled by what is temporary, I will be guided by what is true. Because emotions are temporary, but character, that lasts. And every time you choose to lead yourself to step back, to breathe, to think, to speak with clarity, you are shaping that character. You are laying the foundation for a life of strength, of calm, of high-level leadership. The world will continue to test you. But now, you are training for those tests. You are becoming more composed, more thoughtful, more dangerous, in the way that only a calm, disciplined man can be. You are becoming the kind of man whose emotional presence is so steady, others rise simply by being around you. And that is a rare kind of power. So hold the line. Keep choosing discipline over drama, presence over panic, composure over chaos. Because with every choice, you are proving one thing: that your emotions do not define you. You define them. There is no force more powerful in a man's life than the ability to remain calm in the storm, to stand rooted, clear, and unshaken while the world around him loses control. This is not a personality trait. This is not about being passive. This is the quiet, refined product of a man who has mastered his emotions. Because emotional mastery does not make you weaker, it makes you unbreakable. It allows you to move with intention, not impulse. To speak with meaning, not reaction. To build with patience, not panic. And over time, that calm becomes your identity. The man who used to be triggered by criticism now uses it to sharpen. The man who once drowned in anger now channels it with discipline. The man who was once ruled by fear now moves with clarity through uncertainty. Why? Because he has learned something most never do. That emotion is not the enemy, immaturity is. The immature man lets his feelings take the wheel. The mature man listens, reflects, and chooses his direction. One is dragged through life. The other leads it. And make no mistake, life will continue to test you. People will still speak out of turn. Circumstances will still challenge your patience. You will still be tempted to react. But the difference now is this: you're trained. You know how to hold your ground. You know how to observe without absorbing. You know how to respond with wisdom instead of emotion. And this self-leadership, this emotional discipline, it begins to transform your future, quietly, powerfully. Your relationships change. Your conversations become cleaner. Your decisions carry more weight. Your presence becomes a calming force to everyone around you. You don't demand control, you radiate it. You don't seek power, you become it. And you don't react to the world begins to adjust to you. That is what happens when a man leads his emotions instead of being led by them. So from this day forward, carry this understanding: that your emotions are part of you, but they are not the whole of you. That every moment is a choice, not between feeling or not feeling, but between leading or following your emotion. Choose leadership. Choose calm. choose strength. Because the man who has mastered his emotions has already begun mastering his life.